Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of Net at Work, the sideline event organized by the Wilfred Martin Center for European Studies, the official political think tank of the EPP. We are here live in Valencia celebrating the EPP Congress, and after a long day of debates that we've held yesterday, we will now begin with the second day following with four policy debates. You can follow the debate not only live here from the Congress in Valencia, but you can also follow it online on our YouTube channel or the Martin Center website. Please also join actively the debate discussions on our social media on Twitter or Facebook. We will start our day by discussing our first topic today. The title of the policy debate is Squaring the Circle, Building Resilience in Times of Demographic Challenges. This panel debate will be moderated by the Martin Center Senior Research Officer, Vit Novotny, whom I now give the floor. Vit, over to you.
Thank you, Sandra. Welcome to this panel on demography. I will first introduce our speakers. Contrary to what you see in the program, there's a change. Minister Verlinden had to leave for Brussels on an urgent parliamentary business.
Sorry?
Wouter Becker, MEP, is replacing her. He's the head of CDNV, Christian Democrats, Flemish Democrats in the European Parliament, a former chairman of CDNV, and is a member of the Industry and Energy Committee, among other committees. Matej Tonin, MEP, he's the president of the new Slovenia party and former defense minister of Slovenia. He's also a member of the same committee on industry and energy, as well as being active in the foreign committee and foreign affairs and defense committee. I think we both overlap your membership in the same committees, which is, I think, useful for this discussion. Demography is climbing up on the EU agenda. Several years ago at the EPP Congress, there would not have been a panel on demography, I know, because I experienced those congresses. At this Congress, we have our debate here. There was a plenary debate on demography, and there was another side event on demography. So obviously, this topic is rising on the agenda. I think the immediate spur is the declining birth rates across Europe. We also see rising longevity of our population. These two things combined together produce aging of our populations. We have other issues such as gaps on our labor market. And there are other things that come into the mix. I'd like to ask, we'll start with you, Mr. Tonin, perhaps, what are the most important demographic challenges in the European Union, and perhaps if you want to address your country, Slovenia, as well?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Demography is definitely a main challenge for Europe and for Slovenia as well. When we look to the numbers, they are unpleasant. I have to say that the birth rate or the fertility rate in Slovenia is 1.5, which is obviously insufficient when you check what is the average age of the woman when she gets the first child. It is 30 years old. So that tells us that in Slovenia, but I will say that the trends are the same in the Europe, young couples decide for the children relatively late, and the reasons are many. First, I would say insecurity. And this insecurity can originate and can come from different reasons. One is definitely housing, that young couples have a lot of problems how to get appropriate housing for them. Second is definitely jobs. And the third one is the overall security. So what is the discussion in the society? What is the feeling in the society? How they feel? How secure they feel that they decide for the children? So all those issues are important in Slovenia. That the birth rate is low. And I would say that the same things goes for the whole European Union, that we are somewhere in the average and there are not many differences. And what is even sadder, or I would say more complicated, that the different countries try to apply the different measures, but even though there are not big differences in the end with the fertility rate or the birth rate.
Yeah. Um, Mr. Becker, what is your take? What are the most important challenges in demography?
Well, I totally agree with the analysis of my colleague. In the Letta report last year was written that we have a birth rate of 4.7 million babies in 2008, and we have now a birth rate of 3.7 million babies a year. That says something. That's a lack of 1 million yearly. When we look, for example, to Germany, they got a pension rate of 1 million people yearly. 1 million people get retired yearly, and there is an influx into labor market of 600,000 people. So it means 400,000 people yearly less people going to work when you just count on the demographical analysis. I was Minister of Health for some years, and we had a lack of people working in the health sector in Europe between now and 2030. That's not far away, 5 years. We will have a lack of 4 million people only in the healthcare sector. And so the question is, how can we organize our labor market, our demography, our migration policy, and our integration policy? And I think that these are key elements. How organizing the integration of people, and how organizing also the illegal migration, because this is something that is not good, also not good for our labor market.
If I may just to add to this very interesting discussion, that how our society will adjust to these negative trends. The colleague just opened the issue of healthcare system, which is under the pressure because of the demography numbers, but I would add the pension system. And there are many other systems which are under the pressure because of the negative trends, and especially for the politicians, it's crucial what we will do to face those numbers, to change the systems. And normally, those decisions are quite unpopular all over Europe.
Yeah.
I calculated, when we say no migration, it means that we have to work every week 1 hour in surplus.
Okay.
Next year, 2 hours in surplus.
Oh.
Next year, the other year, 3 hours in surplus. So it's cumulative. And so I don't think that we can ask the Europeans to work every year 1 hour in surplus a week. So that means that we have to organize our labor market in a good way.
So the same thing goes with the pensions reform, because it's ongoing process in Slovenia, and it's always for the political parties unpopular to advocate that the citizens should work longer. But here we are.
Here we are. Out of curiosity, your calculation, Mr. Becker, was it about Belgium or was it EU-wide?
EU-wide.
EU-wide, okay. This brings me to how to address the problem, right? So you mentioned it's not popular. None of these measures are more popular. Immigration, perhaps, but it's not always easy to sell to the voters. Asking people to work longer, not exactly popular. Increasing the state pension age, or decreasing pensions so as to motivate people to work longer. Increasing the number of migrants I mentioned, encouraging people to have more children, doesn't really work very well so far, at least with the measures that we've tried, or increasing taxes. From these options, the ones that you mentioned, what is the most plausible way of going forward? Please.
Yeah, I said it in the beginning. that's an interesting thing that the European countries try to apply different measures. But even though the results are quite the same, I would just emphasize, or maybe they expose the Hungary case. They have different measures, I would say very family-friendly measures. They try to boost the fertility rate, the birth rate, but in terms of results, obviously they are not doing well. So when we come further with the intellectual discussion, in the end we discover that, okay, normally in the Western Hemisphere, the politicians, we are discussing if we will improve the living conditions, if we will improve the housing conditions. Normally, the young couples will decide for more children. But obviously, this is not the case. So what I'm thinking and what I think that we should change the whole approach in the society. So, to speaking in a way that joy of life is a positive thing, having a children is a positive thing, not a burden, and this is just the beginning to start to change the mentality. And this is not a short-term process; it's a long-term process. And when you check the numbers, where the economy is doing great, normally the birth rate goes down. When you, I was absolutely sure, because I was working on security issues as a defense minister, that when the things aren't pleasant, that there is a threat of war, there is security issues, that normally reduce the birth rate, but it's not the case. So I have to say that there are so many mixed messages, so many mixed things, that it's difficult to take a specific thing out and say this will work and this will solve the problem.
Yeah. Indeed, I think demographers are scratching their heads. Even people who work on these issues are not quite certain under which conditions people want to have more children and when not. But when you said we have to speak about having more
Joy of
children, who starts the discussion is my question. I think people don't readily respond to political messages. You know, politicians going out there saying we need to have more children.
Yes, some do. Some do.
You think they do?
Yeah, I mean, I will present a case from Slovenia.
Okay.
So we have in Slovenia one, I would say, valley region called, northeastern part of Slovenia, or northeastern of Ljubljana. That I won't go into the details because you probably don't know the geography of Slovenia, but there are two valleys where the birth rate is tremendously high from a Slovenian perspective or from the European perspective. So in those two valleys, it's a normal thing to have 4 to 5 children. And we are all asking why?
Okay.
Why in these two valleys specifically they have more children than in the rest of Slovenia? And the answer is quite simple. So it's part of their society. It's positively accepted. It is a new normal in those two valleys to have more children. So out of this experience, I would definitely say that it might have something with the general attitude in the society.
Okay.
That this is much more important than a specific tax issues, housing issues, and so on.
Mr. Becker, is it possible to boost the birth rate?
Well, I think it's possible, but there is no one measure that you can say, if we do this, then we have a solution for all our problems. I think that a good family policy is very important. That's the first thing, encouraging and supporting people, families in also trying to reach their work-life balance, because that is something that is very, very difficult. some time ago, somebody told me when my grandparents were there, only my grandfather was at work and my grandmother, they had 10 children and they could build a big house. My parents, they worked with two, and the father and the mother, they had 3 children and they could build a small house. And now we are working together, me, my wife, and we can't even afford an apartment anymore with for 2 children. And so that is something that is in the feeling of the nowadays families. And so a good family policy is one thing. We have to take measures in pensions. When I was party leader, we took the decision to increase the pension age from 65 to 67. It was not popular, but it was necessary. A good work-life balance and working on the work on the labor market is very important, and integration. And we have to be very clear on some issues. The problem of asylum is the illegal migration, and that is that we have to tackle very hardly. It is not possible that there is an approval rate of 40%, and 60% has to go back after the procedures, and just 14% is doing this, because it means that 40-50% of the people are illegal in Europe. This is not good for them, it's not good for the society, and it's not good for nobody. But we need migration, and we need the migration, and it's only possible to have a good migration policy if there is a good and a very strong integration policy. It means knowing the language, have notice about the culture. It takes efforts in schools, for example. We have an asylum. I was a mayor for 12 years, and we had an asylum center in my town of 500 people, and I was mayor of a small town, 15,000 people. So it was a huge thing to do. But we took the women to the language lessons. We took the children to the schools, and that is something that I think that we have to do. And maybe that was not the case in the past. And so I think that it's not one measure that we have to take, but a lot of measures.
This migration matter, of course, it's a complicated thing. How, I mean, the sense is that perhaps the EU has not been getting the right kind of migration so far. Perhaps people who, they often come for family reunification, people join new spouses, they get married, but then they don't necessarily come to work. Same with asylum seekers. Of course, people who are entitled to asylum.
We have to push them to go to work.
Because
Because also, when we push them to go to work, it's the best way for integration. Also in my town, the women, there were a lot of women who didn't work. And they were also not very integrated in the society. The best way to get integrated is to push the people to go to work. And we need them. We need them in the supporting sector, we need them in the health sector, we need them in a lot of sectors. And it means also that we have to take into account that some measures, some procedures that we have today, that we have to adapt them. For example, I will give you one example. Nowadays, we have a discussion into a local council about can we be open for people on the front office to be there with how do you say it, with
helmet?
Een hoofddoek,
Hijab.
Headscarf.
Burqa.
yeah,
Headscarf.
So that are issues that we have to discuss and to be open. What is our final goal?
Yeah.
But I would like to say that very clearly that illegal migrations are not the
About-
key to solve the demographic issues. That I think we are all agree,
Yeah.
especially within the EPP. In the last couple of months, I think we stated very clearly that we should deal with the migration much better. And we were discussing in the beginning that because of the demography and the numbers, pressure on society is huge. And those illegal migrants and illegal migration in all countries bring another burden to the society. You were talking about the people who come to our countries and they don't want to work, they just want to use our social benefits, but this just add an extra burden to society. And that's why this cannot solve the problem we are discussing today. But yeah, overall, when we have a declining birth rate, the orderly, illegal migration can be the part of, let's say, a solution. But this, in the past, in some countries already happened. I can say that, for example, in 60s, in 70s, the Yugoslavia and Germany was the case. So Germany need a workforce. There were a lot of unsatisfied people in Yugoslavia. So at that time, Tito opened the borders and said, whoever wants can go. Many went. I think the million people left Yugoslavia and work in the Western Europe. But all those people, they integrated in the society. They worked. They helped the hosting countries, and they helped the society back home. And I think that's the point how migration can help us with the demography. So it is, if it is done in an orderly way, so that the people can legally come to the country, and then try to help us to develop our societies, and of course work, pay taxes, and help to develop the country. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
The only point which we conservatives can support.
Do you feel in Slovenia people are open to legal migration, to people coming to work?
Nobody has problems with the legal migration, but at least the people with whom I speak, they have many problems with the illegal migration, especially, I would say, the Western Balkan route. It's quite open.
Yeah.
A lot of people come to Slovenia, ask for asylum, and in between they are doing many different strange things. But even those who come here legally, apply for the working permit, work here, they normally bring families to Slovenia, and the problem is that those people doesn't want to work. So that one who is coming here legally to arrange things, then bringing the others, means that the others are normally just misusing our social system, our social benefits, and that brings even bigger tensions in the society. This is wrong, and this is the wrong message, which means that now the people are very, very skeptic to all types of migration, because they just see it in a way as a misuse of our budget, misuse of our social transfers and social benefits. And that's why it's so important that we integrate those people, that these people who come to our countries work, and that we have a clear message. We have a clear message down the road to the Northern Africa or to the Middle East, that the Europe is not a safe haven when you just can have fun and you don't work, but you receive money. I mean, that's a wrong message. That's put a lot of people from those Northern African and countries from the Middle East. They are pushing the people towards Europe because the message is simply wrong. And I will never remember speaking with a taxi driver in the Brussels, and he was coming from Morocco, for example, the migrant, and we were discussing what's the point, what's the issue, and so on. And then when he told me that if he works in Morocco, for the whole month, his monthly salary is around 300 euros, then it's absolutely a normal thing that many people wants to come in Europe, because you have here social benefits which are higher than their a monthly salary. That's why I said messaging is crucial, and the governments should send a clear message that if you are coming here, you should work here.
Yeah, okay. I would like to open another potential solution to our demographic predicament. That's labor participation. Not all groups of the population are employed sufficiently. There's often, we talk about the gap between men and women, women often having a lower labor participation, thus not contributing to public budgets, not being engaged in society. To what extent is this a solution to our demographic problems? What do you think, Mr. Becker?
Well, that is what I just said. We have to push everybody to go to work. That's the only way that we can to give answers to the questions that we have and the needs that we have now to the labor market. And there are a lot of people who have intrinsic the skills to do it, but we need to push them, and it means that from time to time we have to become more stricter on the social benefits.
Yes.
We have to push them, we have to integrate them, and we have also to be more open for integration of these people into our labor market, because there's also something that we have to do. We can ask a lot of things to these people, and we have to do it strongly, strictly, but also creating a culture from, okay, we need you and you're welcome here.
Belgium has a new government, relatively new federal government. These things are in your program now. This is what
Yes.
you want to do. We see all those demonstrations out in the street, people not wanting to change the ways the labor market is organized, the social benefits are distributed, etc. Do you think you can sell this program in Belgium vis-a-vis not only people who come from other countries, but also the local population who is perhaps not used to the kind of things that you're describing?
Well, and that's something that we have to do, and it's a quite paradox. People are thinking, why do I need to go longer to work? And we see people who don't work, and why do I to take efforts and not the other one? But we need to, we ask efforts from everybody. That's the only way that we can our pension system and our social system prepared for the future. So it's difficult, but there is that's the only way to do it.
Okay.
So the question how to keep people in the labor market, I think it's essential, especially with this negative demographic numbers. And I would just like to share the experience from Slovenia. I remember that 15, 20 years ago, people were really waiting the time. They were counting literally the days when the time will come that they can retire and move out of the labor market. But I would say with the improvement of working conditions, today many people are willing to work longer. And we have right now the discussion in the parliament, and we propose the bill, if it's appropriate, then when you reach the time when you can retire, that you can continue with the work, but at the same time you get the full pension, so that there is no cuts. Yeah. And we have right now the system, if you want to work further, you can, but you get only, I think, 40% of your pension, and I think this is simply wrong, because then people are innovative and they search the way how to get the whole pension and at the same time work on different ways. I think it would be much easier to allow them to work as they want, to pay in the pension fund to pay in different social funds, but at the same time get the whole pension.
Interesting.
I think that that is very important, and that's the philosophy also of what we call the social contract between people and the society. When you do your contributions, you can count on that you can give something back when it is necessary or when you get retired. And what the feeling nowadays is that there are people who are not doing their contributions but get the social benefits of it. And when you say, and we also did it in Belgium, when you get your contributions done when you're 65, 66 years old and you want to work more and longer, okay, just do it. But you don't have to get sanctioned because you do this, because then they only see the disadvantages. And the consequences of this kind of things is then they will do it in the black market and not on the legal market
Exactly,
anymore.
that's the point.
Yeah, I think this is a big challenge across the EU, how to adapt the end of working life, how to make it more flexible, allow people to perhaps work part-time, not lose their pensions when they work. This is easily said, but I think our systems are quite rigid sometimes and very difficult to change. So hopefully the recognition that this is important will grow, and I suppose there are many professions where people would like to work if they can. So, are there any other solutions? I think we're getting closer to the time. I'm being signaled we have to finish now. Okay, so no more time for questions. I was hoping to have more, but there's no way we can continue. Thank you very much, Mr. Tonyin, Mr. Becker. It was a great discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Vit. Thank you, Vit. Thank you also to our panelists and to our member foundations, namely CEDER, our Belgian member foundation, and then also our Slovene member foundation, Instituto Dr. Janez Evangelista Kreka. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a 10-minute break and we will see you again at 9:45 with our next panel for today. Thank you and join us. Hello again, and welcome back to the Net at Work, the 10th edition of Sideline event here at Feria Valencia at the EPP Congress. We are now about to start with our second panel of today, titled Striking a Balance, Rearming Europe During the Digital and Green Transition. This panel discussion is brought to you by the Martin Center member foundations, Topaz and Toivo, and it will be moderated by Martin Center Senior Research Officer Dimitar Lilkov. Dimitar, over to you.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning to our guests, to our panelists, to you here at the EPP Congress in Valencia. Hello to our online viewers as well. My name is Dimitar. I'll have the pleasure to moderate this session. Today we are joined by the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Henna Virkkunen, who's in charge of technological sovereignty, security and democracy, and also Ms. Markéta Adamova, who is President of the Chamber of Deputies of Czechia, the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
So it doesn't get higher level than this. I hope I don't make any diplomatic protocol blunder, so bear with me. We'll have a 25-30 minute session discussion, and today we wanted to bring together two speakers with different perspectives, different levels of responsibilities, focusing on the fact that we have the urgent priority to rearm Europe, to excel in our defense and deterrence capabilities, but at the same time being mindful of the fact that we have other priorities as well ongoing. So I would like to give the floor to the Executive Vice President with the question, given the urgencies about our defense spending, what about the other priorities we need to pursue? Is there any problem, any challenges when it comes to digital policy? How to get the balance right?
Yes. Thank you very much for this, I think, a very interesting topic we are discussing in this morning. When we look at the Commission's priorities, it's very clear that we have two main priorities for the next years, and these are security and competitiveness. And they are also going very much hand in hand, because when we are looking our security, it means that we have to have also very competitive defense industry in the European Union, and there we need also new frontier technologies. So when we are investing to new critical technologies like AI, quantum, semiconductors, it's also very important for our defense industry. So we have to invest to research and development when it comes to defense industry. In the same time, of course, we have to build up the capacity and the volume of our defense industry. We know that the challenge is that we are lacking very much behind, because many of our member states, they haven't been investing enough to defense for decades, and that's why our industry is not so strong that it should be. And that's why European Commission has now also published our defense white paper to support member states from the funding perspective to increase their investments. But in the same time, we see also that we have to invest more, but we have to invest more also together, not only separately all the member states. We have to do more together, and we have to invest more European also to make sure that we have also our own capacities in these very critical sectors. So I see that the competitiveness and security, they are going very much hand in hand. Of course, when we speak about security, it's not only about defense. Nowadays, we know that we have to be prepared for very many kinds of security threats. Everything can be weaponized nowadays. We have seen that the migration has been weaponized on our eastern border. We have been witnessing sabotage against our critical infrastructure. We are witnessing foreign interference towards our elections. We are facing disinformation, propaganda, fake news. So there's many different threats we have to be prepared.
Excellent. Speaker Adamova.
I would include as well energy sources, and first of all I would like to thank you for having me and wish you a good morning and pleasant day. I think that this is very crucial to cooperate between member states, and there is still room for collaboration between us. For example, the Czech Republic, Czech government now set the goal to invest 3% of GDP to our deterrence and defense. And of course, now everybody is lacking all the equipment for their armed forces. So there is great collaboration between us and other governments, with Germany, with Slovakia and other countries surrounding our country. and we are trying to buy together, because then you of course have a great chance to be maybe quicker in this purchases. So for us, this is one of the most important priority in the government, and I think this is because we all know that security, our security, is precondition for other things. So we have to invest to our own security as much as possible.
So basically the message is that, boosting the commitments and the spending both on a national level, but also not forgetting the commitments when it comes to supranational level as well. Executive Vice President, I want to follow up on the question of member state commitments and overall security, and specifically on your portfolio. You've been very vocal that when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to, let's say, 5G networks, we have 40–50% of critical infrastructure owned by third country untrusted vendors, and member states, let's say, haven't been that ambitious when it comes to following up on the 5G toolbox, which the European Commission issued in 2020. I think only a dozen or so of the member states actually have done their homework when it comes to network security and untrusted vendors. What can we do so that this message gets picked up by national capitals even better?
I think the awareness among member states is now higher than it was a couple of years ago. But now when we are working with reviewing our Cybersecurity Act, we will also look more broadly all our ICT and critical infrastructure, because we know that it's crucial for our security, and we have vulnerabilities there. Like you mentioned, for example, when it comes to our 5G networks, more than 50% of our communication is going via high-risk vendors when it comes to our 5G. And of course, this is not good situation where we are. So now we are analyzing the situation with the member states, but the Commission is planning to have stricter rules. We are going to propose stricter rules when it comes to our critical communication, to our ICT services and other critical infrastructure as well, that we have to look that we have trusted vendors there. We have to be able to work on all conditions, and we should avoid vulnerabilities there when it comes to our critical connections or transport as well.
Just a very brief follow-up. Do you think it's about money when it comes to these priorities, or it's political will, or it's access to technology?
Of course, it's also about money. When we have to maybe replace some of the connections, of course, it needs also funding. But we have to also plan now clear roadmap how we will do that, and have to prioritize also that what are the most urgent needs there. But I see that especially when it comes to our ICT systems and to our transport, we have to really look now that where we have the vulnerabilities there.
Yeah. Speaker Adamova, you mentioned the 3% commitment on defense, and I think Czechia is really well positioned and really vocal of these priorities. But how do you see the European level? Because I guess you're quite in the loop when it comes to the national priorities, national debates. But here in Brussels and also in other capitals, there's a big discussion about the European direction of travel when it comes to defense. There's numerous suggestions about military mobility, defense funds. Where do you see the most important priorities on the European level when we talk about defense?
I have to say I really appreciate Rearm Europe, because this plan is something really tangible, and on the other hand, it's necessary that we are sending the message of unity, and willingness is very important as well. So I think this plan is really needed, and we just need to take an action, because I mean, all of us have heard many times recently how important it is to take our own responsibility of our own defense in Europe. Since Trump's administration in the US started their political, I would say, shift from NATO and to protectionism and so on, we really see it's not only about these words, this is about the action. So I really appreciate that we took it as our challenge, and as well an opportunity for our industries and this is closely connected, of course. Coming from Czech Republic, which is a country with a long tradition of industry and especially defense industry, of course we do our best to support these companies, and they are very successful. They even invest in the United States, which was for such a country, middle-sized country from the middle of Europe, maybe decades ago, something unbelievable to hear. So right now we can be proud about our action, unity and commitment, and I see that we have all the sources which we need to protect ourselves. Sometimes we lack only this confidence.
Brief follow-up. The push, the investment, should it happen within NATO, or you would like to see bigger commitment within a European pillar when you talk about defense? Is there a clash between the two?
I don't see it as a clash, actually. There is no viable alternative for NATO for us right now, I'm sure about it. And it's necessary to really be strong together. We, of course, have new member states in NATO, united us even more with Finland and Sweden, and I think that this is great to build on it, you know, not to make an alternative for NATO. And I even am still optimistic that even with such administration in the US, we will continue in strong NATO.
Thanks for reminding us that the expansion of NATO to Finland and Sweden, I think, was a historical moment we went through.
Milestone.
Vice President, I'm returning to you, continuing to probe on the question of sovereignty and infrastructure. We are aware that we are reliant on third country providers for many critical technologies, semiconductors, cloud storage, the list goes on and on, especially coming from China, Japan, the US. Is there a problem there?
First, I would like to come back for the NATO topic, because
Yeah,
from the Commission perspective, also it's very clear that NATO is the military organization in the European Union, but European Union can also contribute much more to that, and especially we can support member states now that they can meet NATO capability targets. It's one of the most important priorities, of course, now that we have to organize financing capacity for the member states that they can meet these capability targets. And of course, it's important also to organize now the work that the member states could also do more together, because we have seen that in the battlefield, it also creating problems when we have many different systems there. Of course, it's about the training of the also the supply chain and how to organize the supply chain, for example, to battlefield if there's many different systems. So I think we have to have more coordinated approach also among the member states when we are buying equipment. But when it comes to our technological sovereignty, the situation currently is that 80% of the technologies are coming outside of European Union to Europe. So of course we have a lot of work now ahead of us when we are building our own capacities. But of course the good news is that the work has started already several years ago. I think the first wake-up call was really the COVID pandemic, because then Europe also very much realized that how global our supply chains are, and when there is disruption in somewhere, it creates also problems to our industry and for our citizens. And for example, we have identified several years ago, for example, the need to also have own capacity when it comes to critical raw materials. And then also we have CHIPS Act, where we are working on semiconductors. We know that semiconductors is something what is very global business. So often a chip can travel 15,000 kilometers before it's finalized. So it's very optimized, the whole value chain there. But it's also important that Europe should have our own capacities. AI is something that we are now investing heavily together with member states, especially to computing capacity in European Union, because also now when we look our technological sovereignty, we have to build to our own strengths. And when it comes to AI, for example, we have very strong research community, very strong scientific community, but they are lacking access to computing capacity. And that's why we are investing to infrastructure now. And Of course, also we have some other very promising technologies like quantum, and quantum is something that Europe is not lacking behind, so we are very strong there, but we are also now finalizing our quantum strategy to be published in summer, and it will be followed by Quantum Act. So it's important that we are now investing to frontier technologies, and it's always important to remember that we are the best educated continent in the world, so we have very educated citizens. We have very strong research and science here, but we have problems to really create the innovations here because we are lacking still, for example, single markets. So that's why we will also propose our single market strategy very soon. And often our small businesses, they are lacking access to finance. So that is something we are also working now.
Thank you for bringing the positive examples forward, especially on quantum. It's good to remind our audience and ourselves that because there are so many prevailing narratives, also coming from other countries about that we're backward on tech, that Europeans are technophobe, which is completely not true.
We have everything what is needed to be strong and sovereign.
Just a brief follow-up. The 80% dependence, it is a looming challenge. There's been an initiative in the last couple of months called the Eurostack, and the proponents of the Eurostack are basically saying we need to focus on buy European, we need to make sure that cloud technology, semiconductors, bring it back here. What do you think about this initiative, and overall, how can we stimulate this production in Europe and our sovereignty?
Yes, I think that public procurement is playing a very important role here. That what kind of services our public sector, European Commission, member states, municipalities are, for example, buying. So if we are buying European products, of course, it will create much more opportunities. And it's also public procurement is often much more encouraging for the innovations and investments than funding, because then when you are buying something, you are really buying the outcome you are buying the product. So it's also giving incentive for the startups and SMEs really, of course, to also deliver with the product. So I think we should use this tool much more now when we are speaking about technologies. And we are currently also preparing our Cloud Act because, like you said, of course, cloud capacity is something what is very critical also for us.
Speaker Adamova, I want to come back to you and again continue the conversation about the 3% and the defense spending priorities. I mean, 3% coming from Czechia, it's quite a commitment compared to, let's say, a dozen other European member states, which are far below even the 2% threshold. But coming back to our initial topic on balancing priorities, the 3% commitment, do you think that there's going to be societal support about this? Do people realize the urgency of the situation, even if this means maybe compromising with some other spending areas?
This is the role for leaders, for politicians to explain to society what's needed and why it is needed. And as I said, it's precondition, our security is precondition for our current lifestyle, to keep it, to be able to continue in progress in many other fields. So that's why I think that this is really necessary to show to the people that we have a plan. This is very important. And it's not only about a number in the budget, it's about capabilities. I definitely agree with that, because this approach is very needed. We are investing almost 40% from this budget to defense on equipment or investments, but as well we try to increase salaries and everything which attracts personnel, which attracts people to join armed forces, because equipment, modern and great, is still nothing without personnel, and we need them to attract. So this is, hand by hand going with another legislation we just recently passed in our parliament, and it includes incentives for people to come to be part of our armed forces. And of course, this goal for 3% of GDP was, set after huge discussion in the government, and it's not easy to fulfill because we still are having a lot other issues to solve. But we are going step by step, and we would like to reach the number in 2030, which means that we still have a few years to do so. And it's really important to mention that we started a few years ago, I think it was in 2022, when we passed the legislation that 2% of GDP is a mandatory in our budget, which means that all the governments, even if we change the government, they have to follow this legislation because it's written in the law. And I think this is maybe a good example for other countries how to go through, and it helps in the discussion with the public as well.
It's an example, it's a benchmark, and I mean, as a Bulgarian national, I also want to stress how important is countries like Czechia, countries like Poland. We look up to countries in the region for leadership and for incentives when it comes to these topics. We have time for maybe a couple more questions. And Vice President, I want to come back to artificial intelligence, AI, the biggest hype in town for weeks and for months and years in the past. You draw a very compelling vision when it comes to AI, saying that Europe can be an AI continent, and we already see a number of initiatives coming from the Commission when it comes to the artificial intelligence. What makes you positive that actually we have economic advantages, we have actually economic opportunities for making Europe an AI continent?
I think here we have to again build to our own strengths, and it was already mentioned that when it comes to scientific and research sector, when it comes to AI, we are the strongest in the world. So we have 30% of more researchers per capita, for example, than USA. So the research community and scientific community is very, very strong here, but they are lacking really access to computing capacity, and that's why we are now investing to our supercomputers. We are calling them AI factories, and it means that we can open up this computing capacity for our startups. We have about 7,000 startups working on AI also, and we are also bringing together high quality data with the supercomputers, and that creates great opportunities for our researchers and startups now to develop AI. But where Europe can be very strong, I see very much it's our industrial base, because we have very strong basic industry in the European Union when it comes to automotive industry, pharma, energy industry, of course, whole our public sector, healthcare sector. We have massively data there. And there is also, we are lacking workforce also there, so AI and new technologies are really needed there. But when we are bringing together our AI and our traditional industries, I think we can be so much more productive there, and we can also create so many new services that I think it's the greatest strength we have. And also we are very strong, our industry, when it comes, for example, to robotics. And when we are bringing together AI and robotics, I think our industry can be super competitive here. But we also are facing obstacles now, or our industry, that they are not uptaking AI so actively that they could. So that's why we just also opened consultation to our stakeholders, where we are now identifying that what are the gaps, that only 13% of European businesses is using now AI. And there is, of course, huge differences between the member states. So in Nordics, 25% of the businesses is using AI, but in some countries it's very low to uptake. So we have to really look at how we can now support our SMEs and industries to use these opportunities also, because I think we have a great potential here when it comes to AI.
The uptake is a very, very crucial point. I think it also applies to AI, also to big data, also to cloud. I think many of our SMEs and many of our companies still haven't adopted these technologies, and this is a very important message as well, because internationally there's always these narratives, you know, we're looking for the big aha moment, for the big LLM models or something like this, but in essence, the diffusion of technology across society is actually the deal breaker, not only the big breakthrough. So it's good that you remind us of this as well. Final question to you, maybe moving away from the topics and the more technical discussions and the 3% and all of that. I saw that you've been very vocal publicly about the fact that the current US administration decided to defund and stop promoting, for example, Radio Free Europe. We also saw these decisions applied in other international organizations, which their mandate is to promote democracy and the democratic values internationally.
Yes.
What's the problem there? Question number one. And second, can Europe actually, step up in this situation so that actually the European continent becomes the beacon of liberty and democratic values internationally?
Thank you for this question because I've been vocal about this, and I think it's necessary to cooperate among European countries. Firstly, to make a pressure or push to the Congress because it's not only Trump who can decide, and to push them to change the decision. And I think this is necessary because Radio Free Europe, played a huge role in our own history
Absolutely.
and the history of the whole region,
Yes.
and is playing now a very important role in many other countries, more than 20. And spreading trustful information is part of the transformation or help for the changes which can be done in such countries. So I'm quite sure this is part of soft power, and we are, I would say, it's our duty to help them. It's in our own aim as well, in our own interest, because this can be done by not only this change of decision in Congress, but as well by our own support, funding Radio Free Europe. Maybe part of their budget we can cover by our own sources, and these two things are going in hand. So, if I may, I would like to use this opportunity to raise awareness about. And I wrote a letter to the Speaker of the Congress and as well of the Senate to ask them to change the decision. And of course, we know this is a very fragile situation right now. It's changing almost week by week because courts are as well involved. But still, I think it's necessary to maybe remain how important such a tool is in current situation in many countries, such as Ukraine, Russia, other countries in the region.
And I really want to thank you for this initiative because it's also good to remind ourselves that there's a Congress in the States which has its certain obligations and functions.
Exactly.
So pressure coming from different levels, so reminding them about the commitments and about the priorities is essential. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our session. A warm round of applause for our speakers. Thank you very much. And Sandra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dimitar. Thank you to our speakers and our member foundation, Topaz from Czechia and Toivo from Finland. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we will see you again in less than half an hour at 10:45, where we will continue our debate on enlargement and the Western Balkan. Thank you and see you at 10:45. Dear ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to our third panel of today and a total, the ninth panel of this 10th edition of Martin Center Network. We are here joined by our two member foundation, the Croatian one, ZHDZ, and the Albanian FLD. The next panel debate is titled Make Enlargement Great Again, the Geopolitical Importance of the Western Balkans, and the debate will be conducted by Katerina Jakimovska, Martin Center Senior Project Officer. Katerina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning from my side. We are so proud that you're from the Balkans, so we had to have a delay on this panel. My name is Katerina Jakimovska, Senior Project Officer at the Martin Center. Today we are here to discuss the Western Balkans, a region with unfinished European story, finding itself again on the crossroad of the current political turmoil we have been experiencing in the past few weeks. About its geopolitical importance, we will discuss together with today Karlo Ressler, member of the European Parliament from Croatia, from Hrvatska Demokratska Zajednica, in his second term, chair of the delegation to the EU North Macedonia Joint Parliamentary Committee. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thank you for the invitation.
Akil Kraja, Chief of Staff of our Democratic Party, candidate for Member of Parliament, Executive Director of the Freedom and Democracy Foundation, Member Foundation of the Martin Center.
Thank you for the invitation. Pleasure being here.
I'm going to kick off with a couple of the questions which I prepared are a bit best case scenario. So you allow me to dream or get me back to reality. We'll place this discussion like this. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Ressler. How do you see the geopolitical positioning of the Western Balkans in this new reordering? Can we expect a larger European engagement in the region, or the fears of further marginalization of the region could actually effectuate into reality? What is your position?
Sure, but thank you for the invitation first. I just want to do it also on behalf of our foundation that we were included, and on behalf of our foundation director, Srećko Prusina, who couldn't be here today. But I think that really what Wilfred Martin Center is doing is extraordinary, and it's very important to try to connect and to gather all the foundations of the party members of the EPP together. And I think that this work, which is not always visible from Brussels, is valuable and should be even better connected. But to go back to your question, I think that it has become really quite clear, especially after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, but after really the complete geopolitical shift and transformation that we're witnessing basically sometimes really painfully every day, that also the so-called Western Balkans or the Southeast Europe has really become even more important, and it has become clearer than it used to be that the stability of the region is directly linked not only to the stability of the neighboring countries, but also to the peace, security in our whole continent. And in that sense, I think that these geopolitical tensions and transformations have also underlined this strategic role of the enlargement. That enlargement is not only some kind of abstract, technical, administrative, or only legal exercise, but that this is something much broader, that it really involves the social transformation that Croatia has also passed before we joined the European Union now 12 years ago, but also then at the same time that it obviously has its own geopolitical and security dimension.
I will just follow up with a small question. In my question, I was also referring to the fact that Ukraine gain a bit of priority in the enlargement agenda of the EU. The candidacy for Moldova and Georgia vis-a-vis the Western Balkans as well. It was felt like since the Russian aggression on Ukraine that Western Balkans was a bit sided in this process. Can we expect now with this some kind of a push in the enlargement agenda?
Listen, I think it's definitely true that for Ukraine, for Georgia, for Moldova, they have gained momentum, and these geopolitical shifts have been quite especially witnessed in this area. But at the same time, this should not be viewed as some kind of race. And in that sense, I think it's really mostly a false dilemma, because I think that it's very important for both regions and for Europe as such that they're developing and that they are coming closer civilizationally to the European Union, as I said, not only administratively. And in that sense, I think that this is a parallel process. I think that obviously it's impossible that people won't try to compare it and to see it in that sense. But I don't see it as competition. It should never really become competition and a race, but we should judge the countries and the candidate countries primarily towards their own benefits and towards their own path, and that's the only way how we can do it, merit-based.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lakraya, still keeping the geopolitical perspective, but from the outside now of the EU. This is a question which is a bit dreamy. From your perspective, what are the primary geopolitical, what would be the primary geopolitical motivations for the EU to accelerate the integration of the Western Balkans into the EU, and what would be decisive now in this geopolitical reordering, like I'm phrasing it, to absorb the region and unite the continent?
Look, I'm going to put it straightforward so we don't lose time. The Western Balkans is the European backyard. And if you see it from Russia, the Arab world, China, or even from Africa, the basic is like that. If you cannot manage your backyard, don't come give us lessons. As basic as that. So if the European Union forgets that the Western Balkans, actually, it's within the EU because we are fully surrounded by the EU, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Italy, the basics is that the EU let's say, incapacity to manage, to accelerate, to improve the enlargement. I would prefer the adhesion process because we are already encircled by you, so it's not enlargement, it's adhesion. It shows the truth about the EU force as of being a driving reference for other non-democratic regions or developing countries. So it is as basic that, and we have forgotten that lesson. We have forgotten that lesson. And the Western Balkans has gone through wars, etc., etc. We know that. But we shall not forget that enlargement in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, when Spain joined the EU, it was after Franco's death. So even Spain was not a democratic country where we are today, right? So even the European Union per se in the 50s when it was created was about one objective, it was about peace, bringing war-torn countries into joint energy market, and then let's see what happens. And what we've done is that we've forgotten this primary objective, which is peace. Peace in the Balkans means Serbia should recognize Kosovo. Peace in the Balkans means that organized crime shall be tackled through EU interventions because they are undermining democratic principles. So if we say things like that, then we say, okay, enlargement, indeed, it's about peace. And that's maybe one of the core things that we have forgotten here. The enlargement means about ensuring a prosperous Europe, not just some countries that might become like us. We are Europe. The Western Balkans perceive themselves as part of the European Union. My daughter was born in Italy. Myself, I've been studying in France. I have cousins living in Italy, in France, in Germany with EU passports. We have as many Albanian voters in the country as outside the European Union. I mean, what do you want more to be considered European? The acquis? Okay, let's talk about other countries that do have issues with the acquis. But if EU integration is only acquis, then God knows if Turkey tomorrow starts saying, let's make another alternative to the region. What about Russia? Russia had a free market exchange agreement with Serbia. Let's not forget about that. 5 years ago, they signed an agreement. Let's not forget about Open Balkans, a project that was sold to member countries like an alternative. God knows we don't want an alternative to the European Union. We want only full integration to the EU. We don't want open Balkans as an alternative. And on May 16th, the European political community, what is that? The European political community. 44 European leaders, the continent now, not the EU Union, are coming in Tirana talking about the EU integration. 44? How many countries are there in the EU first place? So are we saying we have the Council of Europe, but we're creating a new Council of Europe without Russia? And I mean, so again, integration for us is not forgetting that we are part of the EU because we are encircled by the European Union. We live with the European Union, we trade with the EU.
Thank you so much. This was a very
Thank you.
clear message. Over to you again, Mr. Ressler. As chair of the delegation to the EU and North Macedonia Joint Parliamentary Committee, do you see a solution to the so-called bilateralization of the enlargement process as is now very omnipresent? Croatia was in a similar situation prior to its accession, and what lessons do you think that could be learned to overcome these obstacles which are very present in the Balkans? We have several bilateral disputes which are an obstacle in themselves.
It's true. We were having similar situation before we joined the European Union. Now, 12 years later, it seems really like it was completely unnecessary, and I think that that's the opinion not only coming from Croatia but even broader. And it really shows how bilateralization should be avoided in this whole negotiation process. I think that it's important how you define it and what you really mean by it. I don't think that every issue which a certain member state can have in the negotiations can automatically be described as bilateralization. And at the same time, we are trying to help as much as we can, also from the point of view from the parliament side. We are now currently working on the resolutions on the progress reports of basically all 6 Western Balkan countries, including North Macedonia. And I think that it's important that at least from the parliament, the positive message of enlargement, the positive message of really connecting these countries with the European Union comes, and that at least from the European Parliament we don't have any doubts and challenges about really recognizing the deep identity and the deep heritage that each of those countries and nations really do have. I would say that North Macedonia has perhaps been in the worst position in the past decades. If you remember, 20 years ago, they were in the same position as Croatia when they were becoming the candidate country. Then later, when the Commission recommended the opening of their accession talks.
Yeah.
But this is something that is still not fully operational and doesn't work in practice. And this is really testing the patience of the people, not only in North Macedonia, but really throughout the region. And I think that understandably is testing the patience, but it is also challenging and undermining the credibility of the whole European project. And that's why we are in the worst situation where we were 20 years ago, when you didn't have that level of frustration and that level of the problems as we do have now. But to conclude on a more positive note, we are where we are, and I think that we should look in the future and realize that this is something that exists. And unfortunately, sometimes also talking with the colleagues in Brussels, many people don't see it so closely. Many people can perhaps cognitively understand it, but they don't have the same level of empathy and of understanding what does it mean for a certain country that for years and years we are basically repeating similar lines, and then nothing much is moving. But as I said in the beginning, I think that really the whole new geopolitical reshuffle is underlining once again, and is our last chance to do something. I wouldn't say that the responsibility is only on Brussels or on the capitals of the member states. I think that this responsibility goes also to the region and to the capitals, in which part of the political elites have even stopped offering this lip service to the EU integration as such, and they're having their own calculations. But I think that we have to do what we can, and we'll try to do our best, at least with the 6 resolutions that we are going to have in the European Parliament. And I think that they are sending the friendly message to enlargement, but also friendly message to these countries which have been faced with difficult internal but also external situations.
Thank you. Mr. Kraja, Albania was decoupled from North Macedonia, and finally its accession negotiation process took place. How would you identify what would be the next major obstacles for the country and how they could be addressed politically and institutionally?
I mean, definitely we are looking for a fast track as the possibility to join the EU. So now it's a technical process. You take the key, you translate it to the Albanian law, you try to respect, I mean, it's highly technical. While the objective, I mean, for us is to have a political driven, fastened, let's say, process which says, okay, by this date you're going to become a member of EU if you do this, this, and this. So if you leave an open-ended process, then it might last like for the next 10 years, 20 years. And that's not a solution, frankly speaking. And I think that may also reflect somehow a lack of courage from the EU leadership. On the other side, I have to say that if I talk specifically about Albania, but which is also true about Serbia and other, let's say, realities in the Western Balkans, corruption, organized crime, demographics, not a free market, they also are current local challenges that needs to be faced in order to be considered as fully capable to join the Union. So it's a two-way process. From the EU side, definitely you need a more tangible process, more understandable by the masses, but also internally, I think that, yes, we have also some homework to do on that regard. But globally speaking, I have to say that the EU is afraid of its own success. And by that I mean that I'm bluffed sometimes when I hear EU leaders not saying the truth about our own failures that would actually accelerate the process. And because they're afraid of saying, oh, you have this problem, corruption, organized crime, whatever, and they're afraid of saying it, so they put it into a report written by an unnamed author. And you see in the local realities in Albania, you see EU commissioner coming and saying, oh, you're doing great. It doesn't work like that. I mean, it's positive encouragement. It's not saying the truth. So positive encouragement, we're adults. We're talking about statesmanships here. And definitely, I think it's also important for the EU to not to be afraid of saying this and this works, this and this doesn't work. So if you tackle high corruption, if you tackle vote buying, etc., by name, I think this is the way. And the EU is afraid sometimes of talking things.
Do you see Albania as the 28th or now 29th member state?
Of course. I mean, it will come. It will come. As I mentioned earlier, we have, I don't know how many actually, and I'm going to put a bet, actually, this is also for Martin Center, might be interesting. How many parties outside the EU do have cooperation for the EU elections? And we have in Italy, in Greece, also now in France, EU parties reaching to us, hey, can you join, forces with your diaspora to make elections for us? I mean, we are part of the EU elections somehow, right? In that regard, because we have a strong diaspora, we have, the European Union is our first cultural, economic, military, all kind of energy partner. So it is just a paper thing. It's sad, but it should not. The EU enlargement should not be a paper process. It should be about countries, it should be about states, it should be about, with Croatia, we have signed a defense agreement. That's concrete. That's something that talks to neighbors, to Serbia, it talks to Russia. It's concrete. And we should not be afraid of talking also about military cooperation, about cooperation against organized crime. But it also, the gossip says that we have Balkans leaders having assets in the European Union. Let's also fight corruption within the EU in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have 5 more minutes. That means that I'm going to pose the same question to both of you. We cannot ignore a few ongoing crises in the Western Balkan states. we are uncertain about the future of Kosovo and the possible disengagement of the U.S. There are ongoing protests in Serbia. We also have a crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina with Milorad Dodik and Republika Srpska. Russia seems to like this. Other foreign external partners, external actors, sorry, not partners, are taking advantage of this. This is again my dreaming question. Would a big enlargement be the remedy to finally counter all these external threats and stabilize the region and offer some prosperity for its future? First you and then with...
I mean, theoretically it could be, but I think that we're not ready for this. I think that we really have to first of all, I completely agree that we need a bit more frankness and that this is something that's quite often has been lacking from both sides. But then if we continue like this for years and years, then it's really very difficult. So I think, and I agree with what has been said. I agree that really the situation is not ideal and that the European Union really cannot shy away from these questions, that it's impossible to keep not looking in that direction and hope that something will solve, because I mean, we are saying that when Europe is not present in the region, that other actors will come. They're coming, they're here, they are really present. Patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church had a really nice geopolitical talk and discussion with Putin in Moscow last week, and it's really becoming bizarre. We cannot really continue with business as usual. I think that this is clear. And if I want to conclude on a positive note, I think that this is the fact that the Western Balkans really represents a region of enormous, immense potential, and that we should try to use it. That what we've seen in the past few years, especially with this Western Balkans growth plan, is something positive and is really contributing to this gradual accession or accelerated accession of the countries to the European market, to the European Union. And this is something tangible, and this is something that citizens can then really see and feel. So I would say that this is the direction in which we have to continue, even double down on this, really with the real investment and with the factual changing on the situation of the ground and creating these bonds, especially between the countries in the region and the neighboring countries, also the member states of the European Union, but also strategically from the point of view of the Union and all its commissioners.
Mr. Kraja?
Yeah. I'm afraid of the Libanization of the Western Balkans. I mean, for people who know the story of Libanization means that you might have an equilibrium, which is also religious, but at certain moments, somebody, somehow, they're investing in these balances, and you have a new conflict. So when we're talking about the Orthodox Church having strong ties with Russia, we might also mention there are some strong ties with other religious groups, like Muslims, that are being funded by Turkey or Arab countries. So we have direct diplomatic geopolitical influences that might nourish a Libanization of the Western Balkans. And God knows if we put some immigration flows in this kind of current realities. And think about what happened in Lebanon in the 70s. Think what happened in the Western Balkans in the 90s, and think what happened in the next decade. If the EU says, backyard, Western Balkans, oh, it's not my affair. But whose then? And that's the question. So the EU must seriously not forget the Western Balkans are its own backyard, not somebody else. Neither Russia's, neither Turkey, neither China's or other entities. So it's key not to forget the European Union. It's not about bureaucrats living in Brussels. It's about citizens living in the most remote rural village in Albania, in Serbia, or Kosovo, or let it be Spain and in France, or even Italy.
And feeling European.
Exactly. So it's about European individuals, European people, that if they don't see the door being opened in Brussels by a bureaucrat, sadly enough, somebody else will open their door, and this is a blackmail that we are not doing, but other people are doing.
Yeah. Thank you very much for both of joining the discussion. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Katerina. One applause for our panelists. This happened before. I'm alive, still standing. Thank you very much. This was our panel on EU enlargement to the southeastern Europe. We will now break and then continue again at 11:45. Thank you.
Thank you.
René? Okay, go. Hello, dear viewers, followers, and visitors here at the Martin Center stand at the EPP Congress in Valencia. We will now move forward with our last panel of this two-day Net at Work, the sideline event of the Wilfried Martin Center for European Studies. The next panel and the very last panel is titled Christian Democracy, Conservatism and the Challenge of the Extreme, and it will be conducted by the Martin Center Strategic Coordinator and Senior Research Officer, Federico Tavio Reo. Federico, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Welcome, everybody here and also everybody listening to us online. We are delighted to have this panel on the sidelines of the EPP Congress in Valencia. As mentioned, the topic is, it's the last panel of our Net at Work. We left maybe the heaviest topic for the end, Christian democracy, conservatism, and the challenge of the extremes. I should say up front that in reality what we are doing is presenting a book to which we all contributed. The book, I am told...
This is the evidence.
Indeed, indeed. I am told the book was extremely popular with the delegates here. I mean, it's already sold out. But it's available online. All of you can easily find it online and download it. The topic may seem a little bit technical, but in reality, it's highly political. I mean, we decided to do it because, as Klaus Welle, who acted as co-editor and is here on the panel, he wrote in his introduction, we seem to be confronted with a strange phenomenon which you call political identity theft. We see parties which we would not traditionally conceive as conservative or Christian democratic, claiming the conservative and Christian democratic label for themselves, for a style of politics and policies that we would normally consider hard right, radical right, nationalist, populist. And so this is an attempt to reclaim these labels and to reflect about their meaning in the contemporary context. But first of all, I mean, let me start from a general questions to both of you. I mean, as I said, you are both authors. You don't need much of an introduction, but Klaus Welle was, of course, the Secretary General of the European Parliament, and President Zurinda is the president of the Martin Center, and he was Prime Minister of Slovakia. I have a question about the relevance of discussing these issues for both of you. Why should we care? I mean, there is a tendency in contemporary political debate, a bit populistic perhaps, to think that good politics is not right-wing or left-wing, it's a politics that delivers for the people, that produces good results. Why should we still in 2025 care about Christian democracy, conservatism, these ideological labels? Do they have any utility? So maybe we start from President Zurinda.
Maybe I would begin with the beginning of your question. Why we decided to write and publish such a book. I mean that it was due to the fact that we face a huge polarization inside of our societies, and not only in Europe. Look at the United States of these days. So there is something happening. Why we face such high level of hatred among people and polarization. This is the first issue. The second issue is that whether do we want or not, we'll live in time of the rise of extremes, especially extreme right. Klaus announced immediately after the last European elections that now the distribution of seats in the European Parliament is more or less one-third, one-third, and one-third.
Right.
And the right is evidently on the rise. So there are many practical reasons why we need to deal with these questions. And now to the substance of your question. Sometimes I have also doubt whether such an approach is leaning to the right or to the left. I am a man who prefers to save money and to invest, not to borrow money and to spend. Is it a right-wing approach or left-wing approach? We can discuss, and maybe we'll not be united. But what is crucial in my head is that maybe the approach is not substantial when it comes to the content of the issue. Because when it comes to the content, it is the issue of your professionalism, of your competence, of your knowledge, of your education. But when it comes to implementation, especially in difficult times, if you need to promote reforms, and I don't know to recognize any simple reform which cannot be painful, then your profile will decide whether you are courageous, whether you understand the meaning of sacrifice, and whether you are ready and able to receive also bad reaction of the public, to demonstrate your resilience, your understanding that you are here in the service for people, not for the number of likes in social media. So in this case, I strongly believe that we, the Christian Democrats, can play such a role all the time. It is a saying, and not by accident, that the left or the socialists or the liberals are good in good times, in sunny times. We Christian Democrats are good for storms, for difficult times.
Thank you, President. Do you agree? Do we still need values in politics, and why, Klaus? Do you agree with President Zurinda?
I normally always agree with President Zorinda.
I expected your response that it is pretty difficult to run against.
I mean, you said, why don't we just do good politics? Yeah, but nothing has been answered when you say good politics. What's good? So good doesn't answer anything. You have to answer it content-wise. And the specificity of our family is that we try not to be ideologically driven. We neither have a fixed view of the future and try to bend the future according to those fixed views, nor we try to go back to the past, which the right is doing, in a kind of idealized past which never was that ideal. But we try to find pragmatic solutions in difficult times, as the President has said, and to try to keep the society together. And that's a big problem. We are living in times of culture wars. We have an ongoing cultural revolution on the left, trying to empty established concepts like family, nature, border, and so on, gender. And we have an ongoing counter-revolution on the right, which tries to go to a past which also is no longer bearing fruit. So we are not part of that cultural revolution. We try to find pragmatic solutions, and we try to be focused on the future. And that's why the Martin Center had an approach for the European elections to put sustainability into the core of our program, which means solutions that are future-proof. And not just in an abstract way, but Peter Hefele and his team, you came up with very precise proposals, what needs to be done on debt, on demography, on digitalization, on defense, on decarbonization and de-risking. So not just ideological, pragmatic, solutions-oriented, but our compass is trying to keep the society together as a whole. We are not a class party, we are not a race party, we are not a nationalist party. We see these different elements of the nation, the European integration together.
Well, as you say, technocracy can tell you how to do things, but then you need politics, you need values to know what to do, where you want to get, how do you define what is good and what is not good. That's where, I guess, your own ideological profile plays a role, your own values plays a role. And so going back to Christian democracy and conservatism, by the way, we use these two together because we understand the EPP as a broad family, at least since the 1990s, in which both traditions somehow are present, are represented. But I would like to ask both of you, still, these are old labels. Conservatism has been around for centuries. It started around the time of the French Revolution, so not exactly yesterday. Christian democracy is a little bit more recent. It's a post-Second World War phenomenon. what do we mean, I mean, today by these labels? And also several of the contributions of the book are about reflecting on this issue. What does it mean to be a Christian Democrat in 2025? And what does it mean to be a conservative in 2025? Keeping in mind that there are strong opinions on the right, also strong forces on the right that are claiming this label and giving them a very specific content. President Zurinda?
Yeah, when I was listening your question, an article in Slovakia in my home came to my mind. I was criticized at the end of the last year that we live in a digital era, but Mr. Zurinda stayed being analog. So I was thinking about that, what does it mean? And after a few weeks, I responded that I was asking the journalist, what is a digital form of the 10 Commandments? And this is my response. Time are changing, challenges are coming and living, we are struggling. But what is Christian democracy today? I mean that Christian democracy today is something similar like a few decades ago. Christian democracy means that we are not shy away of our difficulties, that we are ready not only to proclaim, to declare, but also to develop. You need a lot of strength. You need a lot of courage. You need a lot of perseverance. And you need to understand the meaning of sacrifice. All this is Christian democracy. The second anecdote comes from my own experience. When I decided to create the Slovak Democratic and Christian Union in 2000, because after 2 years in power, I was very close to collapse of my coalition. And I recognized that if my coalition is collapsing, Slovakia can forget on NATO and EU enlargement. This is why I established this Christian Democratic new political force in Slovakia. And I had two right hands, foreign minister and finance minister. And foreign minister, he's late now, he was a long time also member of the European Parliament, Eduard Kukan. He came to me and he asked, Mikuláš, can an atheist become a member of your Christian Democratic Party? And I stopped for a while because I realized a man was serious. At the end, after half a minute, I tell Edward, if you think that the 10 Commandments are not bad things for everyone, you are warmly welcomed. So this is about. We should not be shy away of the 10 Commandments. This is fantastic compass, how to live. It is not easy. Not all commandments are welcomed, right? But this is Christian democracy. The times are coming and living, the world is changing, but it is fantastic if you have a compass which is recommending you what is good, what is not good. I like that.
And that also inspired your political life and leadership.
Until now.
Yeah. Klaus, I mean, part of your contribution to the book is precisely an attempt to define the meaning of Christian democracy and conservatism as understood within the EPP today. What do you have to say on this?
There is a long tradition of political Catholicism, but Christian democracy is different because it made it absolutely clear that whatever are your convictions, you have to be a Democrat first. So Christian democracy has to be understood as the outcome of the fight with National Socialism and as a resistance movement against communism as well after 1945. Because the threat is always the same. The threat is also always authoritarianism. If you think that race is more important than the individual, if you think that class is more important than the individual, if you think that the nation is more important than the individual, everything horrible is possible. And that's also partly an answer to your question. we are again in a phase where people say, okay, maybe the nation is more important. And that's unreformed conservatism. Conservatism has also to be liberal, conservatism has to be democrat, conservatism has to learn the lessons of the 20th century. And therefore the people who claim these concepts, like Viktor Orban, but at the same time undermine the functioning of the democratic system in their own countries, cannot claim to be Christian Democrats. Maybe they are Christians, I don't know. From my point of view, hate can never be Christian. And by the way, Jesus was not a nationalist. The apostles went out into the whole world because this was a message for everybody, not just for the Jews and not just for Palestine. So Christian nationalism is a contradiction in itself.
Thank you, Klaus. Very clear. I want to probe you a little bit further, perhaps, on this issue of Christianity, because it seems to me that this has become one of the dividing issues on the right, our understanding of the role of Christianity within politics. The radical right often accuses the EPP of being completely deprived of any Christian sense, but at the same time, our societies are secularizing. So, defending Christian values in 2025 obviously cannot mean what it meant, in the 1950s, when the overwhelming majority of the people were Christian and Christian values were uncontroversial. So there is an issue of the way that Christianity plays and can play in Christian democracy and in conservatism in our time. And so I would like to ask both of you, what is your, you partly answered that already, but if you want to add anything, Klaus, please do. And perhaps then President Zurinda, you already mentioned the 10 Commandments, but there is, I guess, a broader problem which is at the heart of a lot of the culture wars that we are having also, right? Moving away from a Christian anthropology, a traditional Christian understanding of gender relations and so on and so forth. So what should be the Christian democratic and conservative approach to that? Please.
A good question. I will continue where Klaus ended. Universality and tolerance. We should admit that if the liberals or the progressives are dreaming that they can beat or destroy the Christian Democrats or conservatives, but also the other way around, if we Christian Democrats are dreaming that we will destroy liberals and progressives, we both are heavily mistaken. So, and this is why, by the way, we live in these crazy times. This is why such ideologies as a woke approach or cancel culture or political correctness have emerged, because there is a lack of tolerance. If I believe in the 10 Commandments, it doesn't mean that I will expect that you will visit the same church and every Sunday, maybe every morning. So we should understand that this is my private issue. And in political space, first of all, we should be able to listen to each other, to accept each other, to tolerate each other. This is which characterizes Christian democracy in my eyes heavily. I had a lot of discussion with my father. He was a fundamental Catholic, but I was not pushed no single day to go to the church. He just argued. He loved to talk to me and to argue. And from my side, it was the same. So universality and tolerance. These two approaches are needed to stabilize the situation and to create a space in which we Christian Democrats will feel good and will be allowed to promote our politics.
And let's also not forget, just to add that, of course, this was at the heart of the Vatican II Council, which was an important also impulse behind the doctrinal development of certain currents of Christian democracy.
Results, yeah.
Would you like to add anything, Klaus?
Yeah, maybe that it's true that societies are becoming secular, but still our value set and our set of convictions cannot be understood without Christianity. You go to a different cultural background, you might have different cultural sets, but the value sets of Christianity are deeply in our society. We might not identify them anymore as religious or as Christian, but they cannot be understood or explained without the Christian history, and this is independent from individual belief. And I think the core of this is the idea of human dignity, that people have undeniable rights which cannot be taken away, and you can be in societies where this idea simply doesn't exist. You need, even if we try to break it down, the military tactics of Russia nowadays cannot be understood if they were to have an idea of human dignity. Cannot do that. You cannot send people defenseless into their more or less secured death. So the issue of human dignity as the principle, and not the collectives, not the nation, not the race, not the class, that's something I think which is the core of our beliefs, and that's why Christian Democrats have built up Europe after the Second War. Let's not forget it.
Actually, this reminds me, it's a work that is particularly known probably to Italians, but it's by an important thinker internationally, Benedetto Croce, an important liberal thinker. Why we cannot avoid being Christian, roughly translated, precisely with these arguments that the foundations of our culture, whether we are secular or Christian, are to be traced back to the Christian heritage. I would like to now, we have reflected a little bit together on the meaning of Christian democracy and conservatism. There is the other side of the equation that the book deals with, what the title calls the extremes, that we might want to reflect a little bit on together now. Maybe starting from Klaus, because we had a discussion as co-editors about the word extremes, and you were more convinced about it than me. I was suggesting radicalism, and the reason was that I felt that extremes is usually reserved for people who embrace political violence, while here we are dealing with right-wing populists who formally accept the institutions of democracy. And so my first question to you is, who are the extremes and why are they extremes? Because they claim to be the real Democrats. They want to make sure that the full will of the people is respected.
I think you can approach it in two different ways. You can just look at it technically when you see, for example, voting in the European Parliament. Who is going on economics, or who is going on cultural issues? Let's say on who is on the edge. You can have a scale, and we currently have a research project on this, between 0 and 100. You can say those who are between 0 and 10 or 0 and 15, and those who are between 80 and 100 are extreme. So that's a technical description, and if you do that, you find out that currently on culture we have two extremes. We have an extreme on the left, whose program is to empty traditional concepts like gender, nation, border of all meaning, probably in continuation of French philosophy. And you have, which I would call the cultural revolution ongoing, and then you have the cultural counter-revolution on the right. So in that sense you have two extremes. But if we want to fill it with more content, I would say those who try to undermine the democratic order. And the democratic order does not only consist of holding elections. The democratic order is an ecosystem where you can build your association, where you can organize yourself, media which are free and which are diverse, a justice system which is not undermined, a system of financial management which is avoiding corruption, and so on. And we see that some of those parties on the very right try to empty out this diversity in their systems. And I think that's true in Hungary, and I also believe this was true in Poland under the law and justice system. So democracy is a very vivid system with multiple actors, with contradictions, and a political program which I would call authoritarianism, which is trying to delete this variety, which basically tries to impose from the center, that's emptying democracy, even though you might formally still conduct elections. And we have seen, unfortunately, that when these political forces have absolute majorities or are very close to absolute majorities, this kind of authoritarian program is being followed through. And there are some hints that, unfortunately, the United States is in the early stages of something very similar.
President, you have a very direct experience in your region of this challenge because you actually ousted from power in the 1990s, essentially what we could call an illiberal Democrat, Mecha, right? And you were at the forefront of a generation of leaders, mostly EPP leaders, who were Europeanists, who were liberal in their inclinations, who were free market, were committed to transatlantic integration, European integration. It seems very different from some of the profile of the new leaderships that, including in Central Europe, have emerged in recent years, which are much more illiberal, authoritarian. It's a much more enraged, revolutionary kind of conservatism. What is your feeling? What went wrong? I mean, why are we witnessing this upsurge of right-wing rebellion in Central Europe, in Europe, and across the West, I would say?
That's very difficult to understand and to answer such a question. A lot of things have been changed. We are well-being. We live in time of social media. We live in time when people are lazy to read. We live in time when people are not willing to accept bad news or challenges. So the portfolio of values, it seems to me, in general, has been changed. When I started my business, I remember time of Helmut Kohl. We started every discussion and we were finishing every discussion with emphasis on values, with emphasis on reforms. Have you heard the emphasis on values and reforms in these times? And the question is why? And reforms are so badly needed in this time. So for me, this is a miraculous question. And it is very difficult to understand why. Maybe, I dislike to tell this, but maybe we need to be challenged even more to understand that without a serious approach and serious politics, it will not be possible. Young people have many other possibilities how to be happy, how to earn money. In my life, I spent exactly half of my life under the Iron Curtain.
Right.
My father was a teacher, director of the school, and he was not allowed to teach because he visited church for freedom. This is in my DNA unbelievably deeply. Freedom for everyone, for every individual. I was 8 years old. I was allowed to listen forbidden broadcasting, Radio Free Europe and Voice of America. I was dreaming all my life to make my nation or to help to make my nation free. And I understood since the beginning that without sacrifice, without politics as a service, it will not be possible. And then help me to understand what should we do. Not everything lies in politics. A lot of things lie in families, in schools, in churches. We can do as politicians something, maybe, to promote such kind of discussions, to inspire people that it is very meaningful to promote politics based on perspective values, to bring sacrifice, to serve the others.
Thank you. Very, very clear and meaningful answers based on a lifelong experience of leadership in Central Europe and at the European level. Klaus, what can politicians do? What is the therapy? What should Christian Democrats and conservatives, how should they handle the current situation? And what is your diagnosis of what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. The therapy ideally should depend on the diagnosis.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around. So to get the diagnosis right, I think is a good starting point. I've written a long article about this, which will also be published in European View, but which has also been published by Le Grand Continent. And I believe that right-wing populism is the revolt of the lower middle class. Because when you look at electoral data, it is clear that this electorate is, in French, you would call them les défavorisés. overrepresented workers, overrepresented unemployed, overrepresented people with lower formal education, overrepresented people with below average income. So these people are the backbone of this movement, of AfD in Germany, of FPÖ in Austria, and also of the Le Pen party, and of Donald Trump, if you look at Pennsylvania and so on. So these people are people which economically have no buffer. Anything happening, which we call crisis, that might be inflation, that might be mass migration, that might be the financial crisis, touches them much more because they have no buffer. In America, you call this group from paycheck to paycheck. And the estimate is that somewhere between 20 to 25% of the population lives from paycheck to paycheck. That means one paycheck doesn't arrive, you have to sell your car. A couple of paychecks don't arrive, you have to sell your house. And we've gone through a lot of these crises. So these people are vulnerable, and not just in an abstract way. They have just gone through a major period of inflation, both in the United States and in Europe. And they also have a value set which is more still coming from the industrial age. In the industrial age, to function in industry, you need to be punctual. You need to be disciplined. You need to accept authority. In the service economy, you need to be flexible. You need to be creative. You need to be innovative. So we have the less people with lesser earnings, which by the way remained largely stagnant over the last 25 years, with a value set which is no longer accepted in society largely, who say, we don't feel represented. And the new service economy and their values is represented, at least in Germany, largely by the Greens, who have problems which are high up in their pyramid, in this needs pyramid, but not the basics which are important from the people from paycheck to paycheck. So are we representing their interest or not? That's the question. Do we have an answer for the people who are more vulnerable in society? Or do we just have answers for the middle class? If we just have answers for the middle class, but not for those who are more vulnerable in society, we shouldn't be surprised that they go to other people. So that means social policy, a functioning economy, 20 years no growth in Italy, and the whole political system was changed. 3 years no growth in Germany, it doesn't look good. Maybe 5 years no growth in Germany if you take COVID, doesn't look good. So we need a growing economy, we need reforms, and that's why the omnibus packages, for example, deregulation, but also the whole Draghi agenda, I think, is absolutely critical. But we also need a change in migration policy. Why? Because migration on average is a great thing. For me, it's the promise of care in old age, maybe. But it's not a great thing for everybody in society. It's not a great thing for those who have to compete for housing, who have to compete for social services, who are the weaker ones in society. And there are studies, I've read one from the city of Vienna, who is saying events of mass migration are leading to people losing their middle class status and going to the middle class, and most concerned are established migrants in society. So we have to understand that we are not dealing with invented problems, but we are dealing with real issues. So that means we need a migration policy which has an answer to how not to overburden our societies. We need an economic policy which is designed towards growth, because without growth nothing can be distributed. And we also need to go back to high tech. and because high tech is finally increasing productivity and the growth in economy.
Thank you, Klaus. I think this was a very fascinating discussion. We could go on and on and on. The problems are very complex. We have obviously only scratched the surface of some of these issues. There are many other dimensions that we could have picked on. You can find more, of course, in the book. You can find more in our publications. I have to wrap it up, so I would like to thank, first of all, the speakers for their contribution. Invite you all to read the book, to download the book as soon as you can, and yeah, all the best from the sidelines of the EPP Congress in Valencia.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they are still available in Brussels. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our panelists. I repeat, the title of this panel and the eponymous book is Christian Democracy, Conservatism and the Challenge of the Extreme. Thank you very much for joining us. It was my pleasure to guide you through these 2 days of Net at Work. It was the 10th edition here at the EPP Congress in Valencia. All debates will be available to view on our YouTube channel at your ease. Please visit our website, martincenter.com, for more information about our upcoming events, and also there are all our publications available for download. Thank you so much, and adios from Valencia. Bye.